Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca is obviously a long homage to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Among the many qualities that the novel shares with the earlier Victorian narrative is the possibility that our narrator is not entirely reliable. Jane Eyre features Jane, a character who engages in all the actions that take place in the story, but also Jane, the writer, who is writing about all the events retrospectively. And from time to time, Jane, the writer, will insert herself into the story and say, okay, I'm going to speed up 5 years, or I'm going to switch over to the present tense now. And this intrusion of the narrator suggests that the Jane who actually is in the story may have blind spots that the narrator, writing from many years in the future, does not. So let's think about the narrator in Rebecca. This narrator famously is never named in the course of the novel. We learn that she has a lovely name that's difficult to spell. We learn this from Maxim de Winter. But we have to ask ourselves, is this a narrator whose account of events is trustworthy? Well, the fact that the novel opens with a dream should immediately put us on our guard that this is a narrator who might be just as interested in dream or fantasy or reverie than in what is actually happening. And I think that Du Maurier early in the novel offers us a pretty strong hint that this is a narrator whose relationship to time is such that it's difficult to take her account of any given temporal event fully seriously. What do I mean? So early in the courtship of De Winter and the narrator, she says, if there could only be an invention that bottled up a memory like scent, and it never faded, and it never got stale, and then, when one wanted it, the bottle could be uncorked, and it would be like living in the moment all over again. So this is someone who doesn't want the past to be past, someone who wants to take a really lovely moment from the past and bottle it up so she can relive it as many times as she wants to. We might say this is someone for whom the flow of time is an enemy, because what does the flow of time do? Well, it ensures that past events can't be repeated, and often it ensures that past events will be forgotten, pushed to oblivion. So here she's saying, I want to make time stop, basically. I want to be able to take a moment and bottle it up and make it static and make it permanent and ensure that it never goes away. Well, after De Winter says, I'm not really that way, I don't really want the past to come back, I want to get away from the past, the narrator feels like she often feels, that her youth is against her and she wishes she were older. It's odd, really, throughout the novel. She constantly fantasizes about being an old woman. I wish that Maxim de Winter and I, my husband, were just old and could sit around all the time doing nothing but drinking tea. That seems to be her idea of a good life. And strangely enough, as we learned from the beginning of the novel, that's pretty much the kind of life she lives now. A time after all the events in the novel occur, she and De Winter are basically traveling in Europe from hotel to hotel, living a crushingly monotonous life of reading the papers to each other and drinking tea. And the narrator seems to like this just fine. In any case, given this desire to grow older, she says, only like 3 paragraphs after expressing her fantasy about catching time in a bottle, she goes, I wish I was a woman of about 36, dressed in black satin with a string of pearls. So here she wants to speed time up. If 3 paragraphs earlier or 4 paragraphs earlier she wants to stop time, here she wants to speed time up. So this is clearly someone who has an uncomfortable relationship with the present moment, we might say. because she sees the present moment as a threat to the memories that she wants to make permanent. And she sees the present moment as holding her back from the older age that she wants to leap into. And she's probably, well, we learned that Max at 42 is twice her age, so we can do the math on that, right? So she's not a very old person at all. So she wants to jump forward at least 15 years. So given this passage early on, whenever the narrator is describing an event, say at Manderley, when she first gets to Manderley, where she and Max de Winter will live together as husband and wife. Manderley is owned by Maxim de Winter. He lived there with Rebecca, of course. Rebecca's been dead for about a year. And our narrator's great struggle in the novel is to try to live with Maxim de Winter without being haunted by the ghost of Rebecca. Not literally the ghost of Rebecca, but the ghost of Rebecca that the narrator herself has created. And this is another habit of hers that makes us question her veracity. She's constantly imagining that whatever she is doing, Rebecca did a lot better. So she'll go visit people around the neighborhood. The Manderley is probably meant to be in Cornwall. And as she talks to them, she's not really listening to them necessarily as imagining what they're thinking. And she imagines that they're thinking poorly of her. She imagines that they are comparing her to Rebecca. Yet again, this is a habit that she develops that hinders her ability to pay attention to what's going on. If she's constantly guessing what people are thinking about her, she's really not paying attention to what they're doing. So this is another habit, and we might call it her paranoia. She's constantly assuming that people think the worst of her. And she'll sit and describe for page after page after page. I know that Maxim de Winter is now thinking about how amazing Rebecca was. He's thinking about how beautiful Rebecca was. He's thinking about how sexy Rebecca was. He's thinking he'd like to be with Rebecca. Well, he's probably not thinking that at all. But she does this with the servants as well, in particular Miss Danvers. So this paranoid projection of her own self-loathing onto others, assuming that they think of her what she thinks of herself, is another mental habit that, again, questions her veracity. There are others. She's constantly daydreaming. So early on, when she and Maxim are sitting in the library of Manderley having tea, instead of being present to what's going on, she starts imagining, what will it be like when we have 2 children, 2 boys, and this is what they'll do of a day. They'll be doing this, they'll be doing that. It'll be amazing. So she's constantly daydreaming about something else. Obviously, she's daydreaming about the past. That's not the right word. She's obsessed with the past as she imagines it. She imagines the past, Rebecca's past, again, as a kind of floating standard that demeans her constantly. But she has a faculty for daydreaming, which is a more kind of projective mental activity, where she imagines, this is what it's going to be like in the future. So she imagines in great detail the 2 boys they'll have. Another time she imagines in great detail how it'll be when they're old and they're sitting around just drinking tea all the time. So given what I'll call the interiority, the fervid, I'll say it, the neurotic interiority of this narrator, whether we take her seriously or not is a big question. And another big question about her veracity is when we start asking, what is her intention? Is her intention in this novel to tell her story in such a way that she will ultimately prove herself to be worthy of Maxim de Winter, that she'll ultimately prove herself as a wife just as good as Rebecca, or perhaps better than Rebecca? That seems to be her intention. But ironically, the novel is called Rebecca, and the narrator never tells us her name. So the novel, regardless of what her seeming intention is, turns out to be the opposite, we might say, because it's about Rebecca. So given the nervousness, given the paranoia, given the dreaminess, of this narrator. We just need to be very alert to whether or not we can trust her. It seems indeed that we cannot, well, which makes us ask, well, what account of the events is authentic in this novel? And given that we're seeing everything through this narrator's eyes, we might be left with, well, we don't know. We can never know. It's almost like we're trapped in this narrator's fevered dreams and fantasies and projections. So that puts us in an odd epistemological position as readers. And we have to ask ourselves, why would du Maurier use this technique? Well, it's a time-honored Gothic technique that we know that many of the great Gothic texts are irreducibly ambiguous. And that's part of the unease that they generate. But also I think that this is a novel that puts readers in the same place as the narrator in a way, because the narrator is thrown in this world of Manderley, which is a truly Gothic mansion. You can get lost in it very easily. It seems to be haunted, not really, but psychologically haunted with the ghost of Rebecca. She's in this world and she doesn't know what's going on. She's trying to interpret the clues. That servant did that. What does that mean? That servant did this. What did that mean? Maxima did this. What does this mean? So she's constantly put in mysterious situations that she doesn't quite know how to parse. So we as readers find ourselves in a similar situation in relation to the narrator, where we're constantly asking ourselves, what really happened there? Can we really trust her? Does this servant really see her negatively? Or is she just projecting onto the servant her own self-loathing? We can't tell often. So I would say then that du Maurier probably imagined this ambiguous narrator as a sort of feature of the Gothicness of her novel, and perhaps even a feature of her novel that looks back to Jane Eyre. But also there's a kind of interesting rhetoric to this narrator that puts readers in a particular position toward the text that requires a lot of alertness and very interactive reading habits.